December 24, 1944, Camp Dubois, Wyoming. 3 feet of snow trapped German prisoners and American guards together. At 1800 hours, the mess hall doors swung open. The prisoners expected bread rations and watery soup, but instead Lieutenant Harold Harlem announced a full turkey dinner with all the trimmings. That winter, 425 Axis prisoners were scattered across American soil. But tonight, in this isolated timber camp, the rules of war dissolved into something neither side anticipated. Rudolf Richel, a former Wehrmacht sergeant captured at St. Vith during the Battle of the Bulge, recorded in his diary that evening that they celebrated together according to German custom. Both sides were deeply impressed by the entertainment, a Christmas program with a small orchestra, German carols, and typed programs full of jokes about guards and prisoners alike. The Americans surprised everyone by setting up a special table for the German officers, sharing their Christmas rations, and passing around turkey carved by American mess sergeants who, only 3 months earlier, had been firing into Wehrmacht positions in the Hurtgen forest. The arithmetic of captivity in America defied everything these men knew about war. Over 371,000 German prisoners were held in camps from Maine to California, 155 base camps and 500 Strenetidstreisnate. Every state except Vermont, North Dakota, and Nevada hosted enemy soldiers who worked farms, built roads, and harvested crops that fed the nation fighting their homeland. But numbers told only part of the story. The real shock came in moments like this, when Private Wilhelm Schaefer from the 21st Panzer Division bit into his first piece of American turkey and realized he now weighed more as a prisoner than he had as a free soldier in the Wehrmacht. The transformation began in the Atlantic shipping lanes, where German submarines that once terrorized Allied convoys now carried their own captured crews to American shores. The irony cut deep. U-boat commander Hinrich Blickrod, captured when his submarine was depth-charged off the Azores, found himself aboard the Queen Mary steaming toward New York Harbor, the same luxury liner his submarines had once tried to sink, now delivering him to captivity in comfort beyond anything he had known in wartime Germany. 3 meals a day, hot showers, medical care, the Geneva Convention interpreted by Americans who seemed determined to exceed its standards, not merely meet them. Camp Greeley, Colorado represented the typical German POW experience. Captain Gard Müller, former artillery officer with Army Group Center, arrived there in September 1944 after being captured during the Soviet summer offensive. The camp processed 4,000 prisoners that autumn. Müller expected brutal conditions like those rumored in Soviet camps. Instead, American guards issued him new wool uniforms, leather boots, and cotton undergarments, better equipment than many Wehrmacht units had received. The mess hall served 3 hot meals daily: scrambled eggs, bacon, orange juice, and pancakes with maple syrup, foods that had vanished from German tables by 1942. The daily routine shocked German officers accustomed to rigid military hierarchy. American guards supervised, but German NCOs maintained camp discipline. Roll calls, work details, and formations were led by German ranks who retained their authority. American Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison explained the policy. "You remain soldiers. You maintain your structure. We provide security and treaty compliance. How you organize daily life is your responsibility." This system produced unexpected results. Prisoners organized educational programs, mathematics taught by former university professors, engineering by Wehrmacht technical officers, and English lessons for former Hitler youth leaders. Camp libraries held books banned in Nazi Germany, literature that reopened minds long closed by propaganda. Work programs integrated German POWs into America's wartime economy. The 1944 Colorado sugar beet harvest required 30,000 workers, and with so many Americans overseas, German prisoners filled the gap. Otto Brenner, a former panzer driver captured in Falaise, found himself operating John Deere tractors near Denver. The technology impressed him, hydraulic systems and precision manufacturing far ahead of German machinery. He earned 80 cents a day, enough for cigarettes, beer, and magazines at the camp canteen. Farmers paid the War Department at fair labor rates, and by June 1945, POW work programs had generated $22 million for the U.S. Treasury. Yet the value extended beyond economics. Many farmers, like Cecil Camel in South Carolina, developed personal friendships with their German workers. His family invited 3 former Wehrmacht soldiers to Christmas dinner that year. They shared turkey, dressing, sweet potatoes, and apple pie, foods the soldiers hadn't tasted since before the war. What began as a simple meal turned into something profound. Camel, then 12 years old, later recalled how that night German prisoners and American hosts gathered around the piano, singing carols together as enemies turned briefly into friends. Camp Crossville, Tennessee, housed Germany's most elite prisoners, over 1,500 officers captured in North Africa and Europe, including generals, colonels, and Knight's Cross recipients. The camp, once a civilian conservation site, was upgraded with barracks, dining halls, and recreation areas. Its distinction lay in its officer-only status, separate dining, no manual labor, and full adherence to Geneva Convention privileges. Captain Gerhard Hennis, a veteran of the Afrika Korps, arrived in October 1943 expecting harsh treatment. Instead, he was processed with efficiency, given a medical exam, a uniform, and quarters. His insignia and personal effects were returned after inspection, and no interrogation followed beyond name, rank, and number. Even his first meal stunned him. Roast beef, potatoes, fresh vegetables, butter, milk, coffee, and dessert, more nourishment than he'd seen since before the war, and far better than the field rations of the Wehrmacht. Daily meals at Camp Crossville followed a generous rotation: fried chicken, pork chops, beef stew, salmon, and vegetables prepared by German cooks using American ingredients. The contrast with wartime Germany was staggering. Captain Gerhard Hennis later recalled in his memoir, published 60 years after the war, that they received 3 square meals a day, with breakfasts featuring long-forgotten or newly cherished foods: scrambled eggs, crisp bacon, fresh orange or V8 juice, all kinds of cereal, and hotcakes soaked in maple syrup. American abundance overwhelmed men who had lived under rationing since 1939. The camp canteen was stocked with cigarettes, beer, candy, magazines, books, and sporting goods. Prisoners used their work pay to purchase items that had been unavailable in wartime Germany: Coca-Cola, ice cream, chocolate bars, simple luxuries that showcased the vast reach of American industry. The psychological impact of this abundance went far beyond the material comfort. Many prisoners began to realize they had been fighting an enemy whose industrial capacity and resources were beyond anything they had imagined. That revelation extended to the American military itself. German prisoners watched their captors with professional curiosity. They noted supply systems that delivered fresh food even to remote camps, medical facilities stocked with modern equipment, and communication networks linking isolated outposts to national command centers. Veterans of the Wehrmacht's logistical corps, long considered among the best in the world, were astonished at how consistently American quartermasters supplied more than 400,000 prisoners across the United States, often with greater efficiency than Germany managed for its own troops. Security arrangements, too, defied expectations. American guards carried rifles but rarely displayed them. Fences were modest, watchtowers widely spaced, and many camps operated under an informal honor system. Trusted prisoners often worked outside the compound, without direct supervision. Escape attempts were rare, fewer than 1%, and most escapees returned within days, cold, hungry, and grateful for the warmth and food they had left behind. By Christmas 1944, the war's outcome was clear. Soviet forces had reached Germany's borders, Allied armies were advancing toward the Rhine, and German cities were burning under relentless bombing. Letters from home brought grim news of rationing, destruction, and displacement. Yet the prisoners in America now lived in comfort unimaginable to their comrades still fighting. For many, this contrast triggered deep reflection about the ideology that had brought them here. At Camp Douglas, Wyoming, German and Italian prisoners decorated their mess halls with handmade paper chains, painted ornaments, and evergreen branches gathered from the nearby woods. The YMCA provided musical instruments, violins, accordions, harmonicas, drums, and the camps came alive each evening with music. Men practiced carols and folk songs. American guards often stopped to listen. Some requested German songs, while others shared American melodies in return, creating a cultural exchange that transcended the boundaries of war. By that Christmas, prisoner entertainment programs had grown remarkably sophisticated. Camp Campbell in Kentucky hosted 2 full orchestras formed by German POWs, a classical ensemble, and a popular dance band. The classical musicians performed Bach, Beethoven, and Mozart for audiences that included American officers, Red Cross visitors, and local civilians. The dance band played American swing, German folk songs, and international standards at prisoner social events. Many of these musicians had been professionals before the war. former members of Wehrmacht regimental bands or civilian orchestras, so their performances impressed even seasoned American musicians. Alongside music, camp newspapers provided creative outlets and forums for debate. Publications like Der Ruf, produced by prisoners at several camps, featured essays on literature, philosophy, science, and politics. German intellectuals wrote about democracy, individual rights, and constitutional government, topics banned in Nazi Germany, but encouraged by American camp administrators who viewed re-education as essential to Germany's post-war recovery. These newspapers circulated between camps, spreading new ideas and challenging totalitarian thinking. To guide this ideological shift, the U.S. War Department created the Special Projects Division in late 1943 to oversee re-education programs for German POWs, university professors, foreign policy experts, and psychological warfare specialists, designed curricula that introduced democratic ideas subtly through voluntary reading, films, and lectures rather than overt propaganda. Camps stocked libraries with books banned in Germany, screened documentaries showcasing American industry and culture, and hosted lectures on civil liberties, market economics, and constitutional principles. Participation was voluntary, recognizing that forced indoctrination would backfire. Results varied. Younger soldiers, many with academic backgrounds, were most receptive. Professional officers and die-hard Nazis resisted. To maintain stability, the War Department established segregation camps for hardcore supporters of the regime. Camp Tonkawa in Oklahoma, which held 4,500 prisoners identified as fanatical Nazis, emphasized denazification over democratic education, but still upheld humane treatment. Most prisoners, however, fell between these extremes, career soldiers who had fought honorably but without deep ideological conviction. One such man was Friedrich Weber, captured at Monte Cassino in 1944 after serving in Russia, North Africa, and Italy. A competent officer disillusioned with Nazism, Weber found in American captivity the first real opportunity to think freely. He attended English classes, read American newspapers, and observed democratic decision-making within camp administration. By Christmas 1944, he had concluded that Germany's future depended not on fascist revival, but on democratic reconstruction. Among all wartime experiences, it was the labor programs that most dramatically transformed prisoner attitudes. Working alongside American civilians shattered stereotypes on both sides. Heinrich Zimmermann, a former tank commander captured in Normandy, found himself employed at a munitions plant near Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, helping produce artillery shells for the very army that had defeated him. His supervisors were American women whose husbands were fighting in Europe. Every day, he confronted the irony: enemy soldiers and enemy families united in purpose. Yet the professionalism and respect shown by these women left a lasting impression. For the German prisoners of war in America, the lessons of 1944 went far beyond survival. They revealed another way of life, one built on freedom, dignity, and shared humanity. Adjustment to captivity proved complex. Heinrich Zimmermann wrote regularly to his family in Bavaria, describing his experiences in America. Though his letters were censored by U.S. authorities, they reached Germany through Red Cross channels. In them he described American industrial methods, worker safety programs, and productivity incentives, concepts almost unheard of in wartime Germany. His family was stunned to learn that American workers enjoyed shorter hours, better conditions, and higher wages than their German counterparts. Despite fighting a global war, the U.S. home front seemed prosperous and confident, not weakened or decadent as Nazi propaganda claimed. These letters circulated quietly among prisoners, eroding long-held myths about the supposed fragility of democracy and capitalism. Agricultural work provided similar revelations. Werner Hoffmann, a former artillery observer captured in the Ardennes, was assigned to sugar beet farms near Scottsbluff, Nebraska during the autumn harvest. The scale of mechanization astonished him. John Deere harvesters, international trucks, Caterpillar tractors, machines far beyond anything he had seen in Germany. The efficiency explained how America could feed its vast population while supplying allies around the world. Hoffmann earned wages sufficient to buy clothing, books, and personal items, treatment that compared favorably with civilian employment back home. The Christmas season brought even deeper impressions. Many American farm families invited their German workers into their homes for holiday celebrations. Near North Platte, the Johnson family hosted several prisoners for Christmas Eve dinner, serving traditional German dishes, sauerbraten, red cabbage, potato dumplings, recipes learned from the very men seated at their table. The gesture deeply moved the prisoners, separated from their families by war and captivity. Kurt Reichmann, a former radio operator captured at Aachen, wrote in his diary about spending Christmas Eve 1944 with the Anderson family near Hastings, Nebraska. They treated us like family members rather than enemy prisoners. The children showed us their Christmas presents. The grandmother asked about our families in Germany. We sang carols together in German and English. Such experiences multiplied across the American heartland, especially in agricultural regions where prisoner labor became vital to wartime production. The sugar beet industries of Colorado, Nebraska, and Wyoming depended heavily on German workers that autumn. Over time, genuine friendships developed between prisoners and the farm families they worked for, connections that often endured long after the war ended. Letters, photographs, and reunion visits followed in peacetime, transforming former enemies into lifelong friends bound by shared labor and mutual respect. Medical care in the camps further reinforced the prisoners' changing perceptions. The standard exceeded what many had known as civilians in pre-war Germany. Camp hospitals were staffed by American military doctors, German prisoner physicians, and Red Cross personnel equipped with modern facilities and adequate supplies. Wounded prisoners received the same treatment as American casualties, surgery, dental care, and preventive medicine alike. Major Robert Mueller, a captured surgeon from the Africa Corps, served at Camp Florence, Arizona, performing operations on both German prisoners and American personnel. His expertise was valued, his ethics respected, and in the operating room the distinction between enemy and ally faded away. Even mental health received attention, a rare consideration in any wartime context. German prisoners suffering from depression, anxiety, or combat stress had access to counseling through American medical staff and trained German psychiatrists among their ranks. Group therapy sessions, individual counseling, and occupational therapy programs recognized that psychological wounds required care just as much as physical ones. For many prisoners, this humane and professional approach to their well-being marked a turning point, a quiet but profound realization that their captors had not only won the war of arms, but perhaps the war of ideals as well.